I'm curious about, you know, everything. I just love learning in life and curious about like growing expertise in areas that I'm interested in, both on the home and family, and also in the work we do here at Luminoah. My name's Neal Piper. I'm founder and CEO of Luminoah.
Can you tell me more about Luminoa and the technology and the device and how that actually works?
Luminoah is a medical technology company that started 6 years ago, and our mission is to change the standard of care for tube feeding or enteral nutrition. And so, what our technology solves is for someone who has a chronic illness, such as cancer or a GI disorder, neurological disorder, imagine someone with dementia or ALS or short bowel syndrome. And there's about a million people in the United States that can't get all their calories orally. So they need a pump to help. And so enteral therapy is essentially pumping nutrition. Imagine Ensure or a blended formula going directly through, we call it nasogastric, tube through your nose. That tends to happen in the acute care setting, or if you're on enteral therapy for 30 days or less. But you're on this longer term, you get what's called a gastrostomy button. So there's a surgical procedure that goes directly to your stomach. Imagine just putting a hole right to your stomach. And then there is something, that looks like this. It's a silicone button with a balloon that kind of creates a port for folks that know what a cancer port is for chemo. Imagine a port then going directly to your stomach. And so we built the first closed loop personalized nutrition delivery system. That's a mouthful. Essentially, what it does is replaces the current standard of care, which for several decades, if you had, one of 300 disease states, you are essentially tethered to an IV pole up to 24 hours a day getting feeds. And there's no data tracking your handwriting logs of when you delivered nutrition. And there's 6 feet of tubing. And if you're walking, whether you're a child with cancer or someone later in life with dementia, you can trip on the tubing and it can pull out that button from your stomach, which can require an emergency procedure. And this is life sustaining nutrition. And yet there's today no data ecosystem to just help simplify therapy and see in real time what's happening. What Lumino has built and is now FDA cleared as of April of this year is a pump that looks more like a smartphone. So this is the pump. For those that are listening in, imagine having something that is small as kind of the smaller version of an iPhone. I'm holding up here the larger version, but smaller than that from a footprint. Um, and then the way this is worn, instead of imagine having an IV pole that you're pushing around, we've all been in a hospital where there's big, bulky IV pumps. Imagine something similar in your home. And now today, someone can just, click this into a belt clip on their waist. And then instead of, big, bulky kind of bags that hang, now we have a set that gets replaced every 24 hours that you would fill it up with formula that looks more like a go-go squeeze. Very modern, can pump against gravity. That was something that we had to solve because the current pumps need a head height gravity to flow down into the pump. And so this just clicks into the pump, and then, this the set would connect right into your button, to your stomach, or into your NG tube. And so the goal with this technology was that someone could untuck their shirt, walk around, and a child with cancer or GI disorder, neurological disorder, and be playing on the monkey bars versus bed at home, or an aging parent instead of being fed on the bedside in a sedentary way can be in the garden socializing with friends. Our mission was to change the quality of life for patients, and the form factor enables that. And now this is the first data enabled pump for enteral nutrition. So you can see we have a mobile app. The version I'm showing here doesn't have data because I haven't been running the pump this week, but you would see graphs of how many calories were delivered versus what's prescribed and your target from your provider, how much hydration. It connects into Google and Apple Health, and you can see uh, what's your weight changes week over week. You can report session notes of how you're feeling, and then you can share this data to your provider. And now, for the first time, in human history, we know, someone will know precisely the the calories to a percentage, the macro micronutrients that you're getting, and then a provider that you share that data with can then, if you're trending to being malnourished or reporting problems, can intervene early. So we're building out a platform called Lumino Intelligence to enable this, and then ultimately that can plug right into like a electronic medical record. So our vision as a company is that you know we can personalize therapy. You hear a lot about food as medicine, and a lot of the issues around chronic illness that we see today in the U.S. and around the world is due to what we're being fed, and the actually malnutrition is the fastest growing cause of death in the United States. And malnutrition can mean that you're not getting the right nutrients, or you're malnourished with nutrients, or it could mean that you are underfed on calories. And so we're working to change that with this platform, and so that we can better personalize therapy based off someone's needs.
Can you tell me what does enteral nutrition mean?
Enteral nutrition is sometimes known as tube feeding, which is a type of therapy that, if you have one of 300 disease states around cancer, GI disorders, neurological disorders, that you can't get all your nutrients orally. So you would be malnourished without being pump fed. So you need a pump to deliver those nutrients to your stomach. And what the enteral pumps do today is, you essentially say, how fast is that fluid going to your body? You know, there's a range from 1 milliliter per hour to 600 milliliters an hour, and it's essentially controlling the flow rate so you don't regurgitate. So if you're a child, you have a small stomach, you need a slower flow rate typically. If you're an adult with a larger stomach, you can, push formula in faster. It's just kind of like with you and I. If we're lying down and we gulp water, it's probably going to come back up. But if you're sitting up, you can drink faster. If you're running, you might not be able to drink as fast. So your body tells you if you're drinking too fast. Now imagine you bypass the normal way that you swallow and goes down to your stomach, and now you're feeding directly in. So the pump is essentially changing how fast that fluid goes to the body.
So really, Luminoa is making tube feeding, which is such a uncomfortable, not enjoyable process, making it more palpable for life in a way. Or how would you describe that maybe better?
When our FDA clearance is the first pump that doesn't require training. We actually interviewed probably over 1,000 people over the past 6 years to really build and design a technology that is for patience and to make that experience better and work more like a smartphone than a medical device. And so we had a child who was 5 with a neurological disorder who has not had a lot of independence in his home. And during our early human factors, he and his mom were there, and he was able to do everything on his own. And his mom started crying and said it's the first time he's had this independence. And I can envision him having more confidence in himself to play around with friends, that his friends aren't seeing him being on the couch being fed, but he's outside playing and they don't know that he needs this technology. We had a mom whose daughter had a glycogen storage disease on enteral therapy, and was at school and kids would say, looks like you're pumping poop in your stomach, or are you an alien? And ended up having to homeschool her child. She played soccer before because of, one, her disease state, but being more sedentary, lost a lot of muscle mass and started being very difficult to walk. And a lot of this could be solved through better technology to enable people to just live life to their abilities without technology being on the forefront, impeding their ability to live.
What is the problem that Luminoa is solving that currently exists?
And so Lumino is solving three main problems. One is that the current enteral nutrition devices on the market really limit someone's ability to be active, either with it. The current technology requires an IV pole or a bulky backpack. Secondly, there's long tubing, strangulation risk for children with that tubing, and a tripping hazard for young adults and adults. And then the third, today there's no visibility of what's being delivered with the pump technology. And so there's a need to provide data and insights of what's actually being delivered down from the macro, micronutrient, and calories to better personalized therapy.
It sounds like the Luminoa technology is maybe similar to developments that have taken place with diabetes. Can you tell me more?
I think diabetes is actually a good analogy of where we're heading. So, not long ago, if you had diabetes, you would do a blood test, inject insulin. And today you have many insulin pumps on the market that can be worn that connect into a continuous glucose monitor like Dexcom, and it's all controlled by a mobile device. So data from the CGM is going to the device and then communicating with the insulin pump to inject insulin. And now someone with diabetes can live, a more normal life. And so now if you can imagine and where we're heading with enteral therapy is moving from a hospital-based system to then a small pump that fits in your pocket, and then nutrition data going to your phone and be able to inform, what's happening to that patient, to the provider, and to the caregiver.
Tell me more about the management of the nutrition and how that will work.
Today, there's about 200 formulas on the market, and there's no system to better personalize what formula to start a patient on. And so we're working to help solve that with data. Luminoa, what we have as FDA cleared is as a pump and a daily administration set that is empty with no nutrition in it. And then we have the data platform of what's being delivered. And then we're working to partner with the formula companies on the formula that then goes into the device. But today you could use our pump, get an administration set. You'd put a funnel on the pouch and you could fill it up with anyone's formula, cans that look like this. And you would open up the admin set and put on a funnel and fill it up with anyone's formula. And so that's how the process works today.
If you have more information, there are many different types of formulas. Some maybe have more protein, more fat, more carbohydrates that someone can monitor both what is going into their system and also is there something else that monitors what is in, I guess, what is in their body, what they need?
Yeah, so, if you need enteral therapy today, you're gonna have a GI provider, clinical nutritionist, GI doctor who's gonna prescribe. And typically on the prescription that you need an enteral pump, you start with what formula, based off clinical data that might be best to start a patient on, and then you're referred to a home care company to get that equipment. And so, where Luminoa will over time move the standard of care is that based off of data, this isn't approved today, but kind of where we're heading in the industry and pushing the industry is that we'll know what formula is a good starting point for that patient and start having data really help drive based off that patient's need to better target the macro and micronutrients for that patient. So, for instance, someone who has cancer, who's on a high dose steroid, they're going to need a very different macro micronutrient profile than someone with a GI disorder such as short bowel syndrome. The issue with short bowel syndrome is you have an absorption issue. So you need to change the formulation to something that helps with absorption that's specific to that patient's needs. And there's over 300 disease states that can need enteral therapy with 200 formulas. And so, with a data-based ecosystem, we can better have the inputs for that patient's need, put a better output up than what nutrition is delivered.
How could a parent or someone or a patient themselves be able to access Luminoa's? Is it a device technology? How do you refer to it?
It's called the Luminoah Flow system. And so the way you would get the technology today, we're just launching what we're calling an early access program across three major health systems across the country. We're going to be publishing data on that. Today, the best way to learn when, a home care company or a health system in your area has the technology is you can sign up on our wait list on our website. We also have ways to be able to share kind of to your provider about this technology so that you can advocate that they get this for you as well. So that's the best way today is to sign up for the wait list and newsletter, and then you can request the form that you can share with your provider.
How hard was it to go through the FDA process and be FDA approved?
Yeah, it took a lot of effort. Yeah, I'll share a little bit more about our story here in a moment, how we got into working on this technology. But we have a team of experts who have been through several innovation cycles and getting products approved through the FDA. But from my perspective, it was, it's quite complex. It's difficult, which gives me a high degree of confidence as a patient, right? As like we need pharmaceuticals, we need other devices. And what gave me a lot of confidence was just the thoughtful approach that the agency took in reviewing, and, there's a lot that goes into this to prove that a product is safe and effective. But on the side of building a technology, you go from, getting inputs from users, whether it's a clinician health system to patients, validating the need, creating requirements, building around those requirements, testing. There's a lot of testing that happens. And then, I'm simplifying the approach, but then, it's several years of conversations and with the agency before you submit. And then, there's conversations that happen during that review period. And so it's complex. You need a lot of smart people working for you to really work through the process. But we finally got there in April of this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you tell me about what led you to start Luminoa and to develop this technology?
Starting Luminoah was very personal to our family. We have twins, both of which are healthy today. And in 2019, uh, one of our twins, started choking on the saliva. We did a swallow study and learned that he was aspirating, did an MRI, and found a tumor in the base of his skull. And so our world was completely turned upside down in that moment from, you know, just living life as a parent with two healthy kids and one moment and the next, hearing the news that no parent wants to hear. And so we were suddenly a cancer family and went through chemo for about 18 months, and then Noah, came home with an enteral nutrition pump, which we had no idea what that was at the time. And so suddenly we were also caregivers. I remember Noah was in a medical coma, medically induced coma for a little over a week in the ICU at UVA. And then we finally got him better and started chemo, and he was on a enteral pump in the hospital. And we were watching nurses, doctors give feeds, give chemo, clean a PICC line. And then suddenly a home care company comes in and we're getting discharged and learning how to do all this ourselves in the home. And so we come home. I remember, I'll never forget the first night. Ended up being about 10 p.m. that evening. And, we're giving our first feed. We're flushing his pick line, giving him medicines, and, how nerve-wracking that was. We heard these loud alarms from the pump. We were, there was 9 buttons. It was very confusing to know how to program it. And then you're trusting that it's working when you put your child to sleep. And, Noah, each day, all he wanted to do after going to UVA for chemo was to come home and play with his twin sister. But, after being on, chemo infusion devices all day at the hospital, he comes home and he's stuck on the couch getting enteral feeds. And so, we had my wife's parents helping, and, Noah was, attached to this pole 8 hours during the day, did overnight feeds. And so his daytime life was, um, very sedentary. My wife's family's in. We had kind of a piece of paper that we'd write logs, and when he last got a feed. We later learned that actually 20% of people that have cancer die of malnutrition, not the disease itself. And a lot of this is because, for people that are on the enteral feeding, you kind of lose track of where you are. You're just in survival mode for the whole family. And so if you're not writing those logs, you might be underfeeding or overfeeding. And so that was a challenge that we were facing. And then the other is Noah was walking with a pole one day, tripped on the tubing, and his button dislodged. So you can imagine on the inside of your stomach lining what looks like a balloon holding it in, pulling throughout that stomach lining. It was, excruciating pain for him and for everyone witnessing what he was going through. We ended up in the ER, and that was our life, for 2 years. So 18 months of chemo and continuation enteral therapy after. And, couldn't quit thinking about this problem. Yeah, talked to our home care company, several others, did a lot of research, and learned there were only 2 primary pumps on the market. And it's like there's gotta be a better way of doing this. I refer back, a lot of my friends had worked in the diabetes care space, and it's like if someone today with diabetes can have an insulin pump that no one knows, a mobile app is controlling it, why can't we do the same thing in enteral therapy? And so, um, my background, was most of my career was at Pfizer and other, working in healthcare, and had no experience building a medical device company. That certainly was not on my list of things to do in life. But I think in life, when things are out of control, you try to control what you can. And I couldn't control the outcome of Noah's disease state and how he was going to do with the chemo. But what we could control is how people like Noah, millions, get enteral therapy every day. And so, you know, when we were going through treatment, a couple themes came together to give us confidence. One was just a mantra that we said a lot, which was sunny days ahead. Our house faces east in Charlottesville. And the cellar rise, our kids are always early risers, and they'd say sunny days ahead. And we'd be asleep, we'd wake up and it'd make us smile. And when we were going through the most difficult chapter of our life, that became our mantras. There's gonna be sunny days ahead. And I think as you tell yourself these things and you build positivity around what you're doing, you also then say, okay, like let's help sunny days ahead for others. And so Noah was getting chemo, and I was talking to the providers about enteral therapy. Started, dusting off kind of the work that I did at Pfizer. I could get up to speed on a new disease state, doing clinical research and getting inputs. And this is around 2019. And then when you ring the bell at UVA Children's, there's a painting of a rocket ship. And Noah and I and my wife and I talked to Noah a lot about space, and he loves space. And so when creating a name, we merged illumination to measure light between stars and Noah's name to create Luminoah to create a brighter future for tube feeding. And so that was March of 2020. What a great time to start a company, right in the middle of COVID. Um, and um, and so we, during that time, a lot of people at UVA had, the biomedical engineering program had lost their internships at Medtronic and other companies. So we built a company, hired folks in the master's program there, and created a research project for a year. And that was really the beginning of the company.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and hopefully we will meet in Charlottesville at some point.
Yeah, I would love that. Well, thank you for having me on the show.
Curious by Nature is a production of Newswise. More than 7,000 journalists get the Newswise wires. Visit newswise.com and find out how to spread your news today.